Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Well, welcome. Conversations with Niki it is. I'm Niki Seberini and I'm so happy to be with you today. And thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to our syndication partner listeners. That's Chai FM, Eldo's FM, Kawi FM, that's in Port Alfred, West Coast FM in Namibia, 90.3 MC FM in Plet, Knysna FM, Wild Coast FM in East London, and Bay FM in PE. Great to have so many listeners across South Africa listening to Conversations with Niki. And thank you so much for all the input I'm getting from you. Please keep those emails coming. I'm really enjoying all the suggestions I'm getting. In fact, the show today was because of a whole lot of emails that I received from you about divorce, dealing with divorce, people sharing stories of divorce. And so if you let me know what you want to talk about and interact with, then I know what to deliver. So please do go to that website. It's www.conversationswithniki, and that's one word, Niki spelled Niki.co.za. And incidentally, all the shows are put onto that website. The link to the podcasts are there. So any show that you have missed in the past, you can get on the website. And if for any reason you have to tune out during this show, please don't worry. We will be podcasting the show as well. It will be on the website within the next couple of days. So as I said, divorce, that's what we're going to be talking about today, except we're going to be focusing on something much larger, and that is spiritual divorce, having a completely different perspective when it comes to divorce. The Justice Department I looked at their annual report, and they've said that South Africa is now on the map in terms of matrimonial woes. Apparently there are new figures, and these new figures show that the divorce rate has rocketed by 28%. So from 39,573 divorces in 2012 to 50,517 cases, and that is pretty frightening. And when you think of the damage that divorce can do to the parents, to if there are children involved, to children, and you just imagine that it's increasing, well, then we need to talk about it, and we need to look at why it's happening, but then more importantly, how do we come out the other side as full individuals so that we can move forward in our lives and still live a wonderful life and not get stuck in that process of the divorce. So I have the experts in the studio today. I have Philippa Levitt, who is a spiritual divorce coach, who's going to be sharing ideas and thoughts and skills that you can try and use to get over this huge obstacle in life. So Philippa, hi and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Niki.
Lovely having you back in the studio. I have Bev Loubser, who is a divorce attorney and who has much experience with helping people through that very difficult time in their life. Bev, hi and welcome.
Hi, Niki.
Thanks for joining us. And I have Julie, who has a story to share, and it's all about the stories, because talking to the experts is one thing, but actually listening to people's personal stories is what it's all about. So Julie, thank you for coming into the studio and for having the courage to share your story with our listeners.
I'm still asking myself why, but thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Well, listen, you're surviving so far, so we're getting there. I'm going to just start off with you, Philippa, because, we've got a lot to talk about, but I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about spiritual divorce. What is this concept of spiritual divorce?
Thanks, Niki. Well, spiritual divorce is really a way of looking at your divorce that is a complete shift in the way in which we perceive it. So instead of looking at your divorce through the eyes of the smaller you, your humanity, your hurt, your difficulties, your blame, your resentment, we actually take a big picture view and we go into the situation and we look for the learnings, the wisdom, the lessons. We look to see how you attracted the situation into your life and how you can use this situation as a catalyst to create an extraordinary life and extraordinary relationships going forward. So as against seeing divorce as a failure or as a disaster of some kind, we actually take this situation, which we regard as extremely fertile, it's a fertile time, and we take it and we go in and we see, how can we take this, how can we take our anger, our blame, our resentment, all of that, and transform it in some way so that going forward we can live an amazing life and have great relationships and make good choices going forward.
Now listen, theoretically that sounds absolutely brilliant, but when you're in something, you're in something. And to try and see that bigger picture when you're feeling deserted, or you're feeling angry, or you're feeling incredibly hurt, wow, not an easy thing to do.
I'm so glad that you've raised that, because that's very true. But what we do with spiritual divorce is step number one is to begin to honor your emotions, to begin to honor that anger, that resentment. It's only when we push it away and say, no, I'm going to be fine, that there's going to be some kind of a difficulty. So we really create an environment when I coach people where every single emotion is welcome, and it is only through feeling those emotions that you can get to the other side, and that's why I say it's a fertile time. Having said that, you're right, there are some people who need to have gone through the divorce to actually be ready to go back, look at it and see, okay, now I'm ready. I'm ready to see, because not only do we look at the divorce, we look at what was your part. This is really about taking radical responsibility, and going in and saying, okay, like what did I do, and how can I make sure that I don't do it again? And you've got to be ready for that. If you're, and not everybody is, and we really do honor that. But I mean, I sometimes work with people who are 10 years on from a divorce. But if they're walking around with blame, resentment, anger, and it is holding them back in their lives, they are ready for spiritual divorce. To do it
we have to cope in life. I mean, we're copers. We've got to just move on. And I mean, you spoke about suppressing those emotions. I just wonder how many people there are out there who have all of these suppressed emotions. It's unfinished business, really. And how it impacts on their everyday life. So I'm going to bring Julie in now, because Julie, you got divorced 10 years ago. So this is 10 years on. Perhaps you just want to tell us a little bit about the story of your divorce. What led to the divorce?
Well, it's quite interesting, and it's funny, when I look back at it now, I still ask myself why we got together in the first place, because we are such opposite people. We polar
opposites.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
There we go.
We're complete polar opposites, but there was something there, and I don't deny that I did love him. But through the course of our relationship, which lasted a long time, we were together for 11 years. We then got married, and we were only married for, I think, just under 5 years. So we knew each other well. I think I grew up with too many fairy tales, believing that good prevails over evil, that you can always bring out the best in a person, because I knew his personality well. I knew the flaws. He was a diamond in the rough, and I believed that he would come out of that.
Or you could fix him, maybe?
I don't know. I believed that I could fix him.
Okay.
I believed he had the ability to fix himself.
All right.
And maybe he sees himself today as fixed. I don't, because we're different. But I realized after having children that I actually didn't want my children growing up with a role model such as him.
So Julie, you were together for 11 years before you got married.
Correct. We lived together for about 4 years. So it was shortly after school. In fact, I went on from school to study computer programming, and he was my instructor. So it's a very funny story. But yeah, and we had a good relationship. It was up, it was down. We fought a lot because there was a lot of passion. And that's the way you choose to look at it when you're younger. And I honestly believed, you grow up. My parents were extremely happily married, and things worked well in the family. So I benefited from having very stable parents. And for me, I honestly believed that marriage was about compromise, and if I compromised, things would work out. And one day I kind of thought, hang on, why is it me that's doing all the compromising? And for me, the divorce process probably started very shortly after my first daughter was born. my first child, I suddenly realized that this was not actually the path my life should be taking. There was something else out there, and I couldn't identify what it was, so it was a long process because I went on to have another child, which I'm very, very pleased I did. I have fantastic children, and they've coped extremely well, and I think possibly because of my approach. When I realized that it was game over, I walked away with my head held high, and I committed that my children and I would not be victims. And we walked, and it was a good start. I did get some good advice from a psychiatrist at the time, because obviously we went through counseling, etc. And the best advice she gave me was to actually sit down with the children and cry and let them know that this is a sad event. This is not a good event, because she was concerned that I might be projecting too strong a front to the children. So we did that. We sat down.
It's so interesting, because as parents we want to show strength, not weakness, so to speak.
And that's the way we look at it. But the children need to understand that divorce is not it's not a positive thing. It's the end of a relationship, and there will be changes in their lives. They need to understand that. Having said that, it was difficult for me because at the time that we separated, my son was 1 and my daughter was 3. So I had a lot of people saying that I really needed to think very hard about it. And in fact, when my husband raised it and said, "Are you crazy? Because what about the children?" I said to him, "This marriage is doomed. It's going to be now or in 10 years' time. Now the children will adapt. In 10 years' time they will struggle. I want to do this now." And I'm very pleased I did. I'm not suggesting I was right or wrong. For me personally, for my kids, it was definitely the right thing to do.
Was that the motivator? I mean, you spoke about him not being the kind of role model that you wanted for your children. Was that because the niggles? I mean, how do you put the niggles into action?
You know, Nikki, it's interesting how when you're in a relationship and it's just you and the person you're in a relationship with, there's a certain dynamic. When you become a family, there's certain expectations. I'd never minced my words. A lot of people have called me a feminist over the years. I'm not, but I don't like chauvinism. And I don't believe that we are designed to be single parents. There's a reason why 2 bodies come together to create another child, another being. And that's because 2 parents should be raising children. When you're left at home till all hours in the evening, when the partner isn't present, when the partner is present and perhaps has had a little bit too much to drink at times or whatever, it's just, that's not a partnership. That's one person doing all the work and another being present when they choose to be present.
I'm going to pause there for a moment, Julia. Philippa, I'm going to bring you in here, because I think that when children come along, that's when the cracks start to show in a relationship. And I think that Julie's just very clearly highlighted how easily that can happen. But a lot of people push through. I mean, Julie was just saying, she could wait another 10 years, and some people wait forever, and then they've managed to find their way back together. What do you think about this whole thing about having a relationship and bringing children into it, and the relationship shifts and changes so much?
Absolutely, and all relationships do. Who you marry is definitely going to change. You're going to see the other side of them after a short period of time, as they are going to see the other side of you. For me, it is not so much whether you stay or you go. That's certainly if your children are in any kind of danger or there's an abuse situation going on, well, there's no question you need to go. You cannot stay in a situation like that. But if it's not that kind of a situation, the question is, you were attracted to him. Now, we are attracted because of the light qualities. There's something in that person that you like, and when you're together you feel whole, and that's where the love and the passion comes in. But what we don't realize is that we're also attracted because of our dark qualities. And those dark qualities are coming into your life not by accident, but actually because it's something that you need to look at. It's something you need to see. And so if you are able to do that, if you are able to go in and say, okay, I attracted this, it's not what I wanted, it's definitely not what I ordered. This person has qualities that are the exact opposite of what I ever would have wanted. But they're here, they're in my life. So how best can I be my best self in relation to this? What do I need to do? And so one of the things that we discuss, which I won't go into in great detail here, is the concept of projection. So what is that quality that you are seeing in him that is upsetting you so much? And it'll be different for everyone. I might see A quality in him, you might see B quality in him. Where is that quality inside of me? And it may be that you disowned it long ago. You just say it's selfish. Let's just say it's just selfish. Okay? You may have decided growing up as a child that you did not want to be selfish. You pushed the quality away. Well, that is a quality that we need. There are times when we need to be selfish. You may have decided, I will be the most selfless person on the planet. And then you attract into your life these selfish people. So you can look at it, becomes a mirror. You can look at it and you can hate it and you can divorce it. But the true transformation comes when you look at that selfishness, you find it in yourself, you have compassion for that aspect of your humanity, and when you have compassion for it in you, then you have compassion for it in him, and then it's over. You don't have to go through this anymore. You don't have to face it again, and you'll find in the most miraculous kind of a way that he is no longer selfish. It's as if you give him permission to shift and suddenly show the other side of him. It's unbelievable. So it's almost like we go so deep spiritually that we expose the illusion. And once you've got it, I've worked with so many clients who we've worked on projection, and they've taken this hated quality and they've looked and looked and looked for it in themselves, and they often they can't find it or whatever, but they eventually, often in other sets of circumstances, the quality comes out. And when they do that, when they go to the trouble of doing that, they come and they say, you won't believe what happened. He or she was just so pleasant. There was a definite shift. It's almost as if they know, because on some level we are all connected, that you've done this work, that you've taken the trouble to see through the illusion.
When you talk about spiritual divorce, is this something that you would do while going through a divorce? I mean, Julie's been divorced now for 10 years, and I know you've been on an incredible journey, Julie, and you've probably come to terms with so many of these things. But something like this that Philippa's talking about, I mean, of these things that you have considered, have you had relationships since then that have brought, I don't know, men into your life that seem to be more chauvinistic? Or
interestingly, about 6 months after the divorce, I went into a very intense relationship with somebody who was identical. And I was left very scarred from that relationship. There have been the odd one here or there, but I've chosen to focus on my children and on me.
Right.
And that's why I was smiling when you were talking about selfishness and selflessness, because I think being a parent, you have to be selfless, otherwise you're not doing your job properly. And I do invest a lot of my time and my energy in my children, but not all, because if I'm not complete as a person, I can't be being a good parent. And I think I pride myself on being a good parent. And I love the reward that I get from my kids, because they're magnificent people. I am biased, but they are well-grounded, well-rounded, well-balanced, and I couldn't ask for more.
Was it a conscious decision to give that time to your children, but to also have time for yourself? To have that, I'm going to use the word just because you mentioned it, that selfish time for yourself, to be a person.
You know, Nikki, it's interesting. Directly after the divorce, I found I had a lot of time for myself, bearing in mind my kids were very young. So I could have that time to myself. As they've got older, they've filled a lot more of those gaps, because they're now people, and we converse and we do things together. So we do spend a lot of time together. But having said that, I still have a fantastic circle of friends that I network with, and I think that is critical as well. And I have my job, which keeps my brain very active. I said it earlier when we were chatting, in the 10 years of the divorce, I have not once been bored. And interestingly enough, I have not had the time to feel lonely. I've never felt lonely. I felt a lot lonelier in my marriage than I ever have since. So I think I'm blessed. I have a very full life and a very rewarding life. And I every single day, I honestly, cliched or not, I count my blessings.
Wow, Julie. I mean, it's a fantastic story to share. We're going to come back to all of the details, but let's go through the divorce, and let's bring Bev into this discussion, because it was your decision to get divorced. Yes, no, because you said your husband said, well, you sure you want to be doing this? Young kids?
Yeah, look, it was my decision. I think I was the one who finally said, game over. But I think it was a natural course. We were both finished with the marriage. And there were other things at play which I'd rather not discuss on the radio, but there are issues that come into a marriage that there's certain things you're prepared to live with and there's certain things you're not. And I made a choice. I wasn't prepared to live. I wasn't going to be second fiddle. I'm not necessarily saying that's to a person. It could be to a substance. It could be to anything. I wasn't prepared to be second fiddle, and I certainly wasn't prepared for my children to play second fiddle. And like I said, I was very clear in my mind. There was a catalyst that forced me into actually vocalizing what I'd been thinking. He'd been thinking it too. We chose to go for counselling because we thought, give it its best shot. You can't just walk away. We counselled for 9 months. It was a complete roller coaster ride. One day everything was great and we were back together. The next day something tripped us up. Ultimately, I think it was the best move for both of us.
The divorce proceedings, tell us about that.
Young, naive, in a hurry to get divorced, because once I've made up my mind, I want action.
You want to do it, right?
Stupidly, I agreed to go with him to see his lawyer. And I never even thought about consulting a lawyer because I didn't give a thought to the fact that he would actually be nasty. Things have panned out differently over the years, but by and large, we've managed to get through everything. It's not always easy. But I think as long as you can keep the children as the focus in your mind and put aside your ego, put aside your own frustrations, you fight. You do fight because you do have an ego and you do have frustrations, and life is life. But ultimately, I think things have probably worked out for the best. He has never missed a maintenance payment, and for that I'm very, very grateful, because that is what keeps the kids going. And we go on.
Bev, I saw you nodding your head when Julie was talking about how important it is to focus on the children.
Yeah.
And we were discussing this yesterday, because you've worked on so many divorces, and I'm sure you've got so many cases where the children are used as a tool to hurt one another, to control, and sometimes the children are at the forefront of their parents' minds, and it helps with that divorce. Perhaps you can expand on that.
Yeah. The easiest divorces that we actually manage to help the people through that process is the ones where the parents are putting the children first, because what they do consider is, how is my decision now going to affect my children? And when they do that, those divorces flow very easily, because it's not about them. When we have parents demanding maintenance they're not entitled to, or too much maintenance, or we have fathers demanding contact with children, you know, this new shared residency is creating quite a few things. I'm not saying that a dad should not have equal time with a child, but it does open a lot of areas where the children are the victims in that, because when dad's insisting on his 50% and mom's getting her 50% and granny and grandpa are jumping in there with their little bit, with they demanding, it does put the children, they call them suitcase children, because they're never quite out of their suitcase before they have to jump off to the next parent or the grandparent. So yeah, the focus of the parties is paramount. I mean, if you get someone taking a really inflexible view about how they see the outcome of the divorce, it places the whole divorce process into an area where it's very hard to settle, you know. And unfortunately, you know, some of my colleagues encourage that inflexible view. So that's why we have, and a lot of my colleagues, we're trying to find another way for this divorce to go through, to support the people. You know, when you're in your divorce process, it's the most stressful thing you're probably ever going to do in your life. And so you're not acting logically, you're not acting from the frontal cortex of your brain, you're acting with your snake brain at the back.
Your
it's
emotion.
instinctive, it's emotional. You do things where you're looking back. I'm sure a lot of people look back and they say, what was I thinking? I'm ashamed of what I've done. You know, and we're looking at children watching their parents implode and behaving so badly that we're creating a generation of children that actually don't even believe in marriage anymore. Because, I mean, why would I put myself through that, what I experienced with mom and dad? And we're having children, the parents are so focused on fighting with each other that they become unavailable to their children. So in the time where their children need them the most, they're emotionally completely unavailable. And then these children go into suppressing, as Philippa said, suppressing those emotions, saying I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, and they carry those suppressed emotions, shadow beliefs into their adult lives, into their adult relationships. And then we see it play out in the next generation's divorce. And you know, a lot of people sit there and say, well, you know, my mom and dad were divorced, and they carry it. It's a perpetual thing. There must be another way in South Africa today for us to transition people out of bad marriages where they're all intact, retain their respect, retain their integrity, look after their children, and transition into the next phase of their life. Because divorce is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes it's the best thing that can happen to you.
Yes, so you were talking about a win-win, not a win-lose. It's not
there
two
shouldn't be a
attorneys
loser
coming in and one's going to win and one's going to lose. Everyone should walk away winning. Now, Philippa, you were also nodding your head when Julie was talking about sitting down with her children and having a cry, and the effect, the impact that divorce can have. And I remember reading an article on how children process a divorce and how they see it as something that perhaps they've caused. How does a parent handle a situation like that, show a vulnerability, be there for their children, and try and communicate that they aren't to blame?
I think that what we are like meaning-making machines. Us and our children make the divorce mean something disempowering about us. So once you know that about your children, that they are probably going to make it mean something, they might not even be doing it consciously. They're probably just unconsciously making me, well, you know, I wasn't enough to keep my parents together, or whatever. It doesn't need to be reasonable. They're children. They are not making informed choices. So they have this kind of unreasonable meaning that they've made about it, which they then carry through. So how, as you a parent, how do you remediate that, I guess? So that would be really to, depending on their age, to make it very clear to them that this is not about them, that this is about you and their dad, or you and their mom, and that, you know, this is what has happened. People come together, they love each other, and then things change, and it's very sad, as you say, and you're allowed to feel your anger, and you're allowed to feel your upset, your sadness. It is all okay. But on the other side of that, it's only when you are prepared to feel that, on the other side of those feelings lies your empowerment. So in your powerlessness, you will come to your power. In your sadness, if you got prepared to go through it, you will at the end of it find your joy. In your despair, you know, you will find something. It's in going. Understand, it's actually a life lesson for them that like no other. And if you're going to pretend that everything was fine, and that you're just perhaps so spiritual, you're just fine with this. Not at all. You can show them how you can go.
Because you're trying to protect them, really.
That's all.
By not going there with those emotions.
Exactly.
You're trying to protect
the emotion.
Yes,
if you don't acknowledge the emotion, you can't deal with it.
Right.
And you can't experience joy if you've never experienced sadness. Is what, you know, that's the stepping stone.
Exactly. So you know, if they could just see that this is a process, it's part of life, it's something that we're going to do together, we're going to get through it, that all emotions are welcome, you know, and that you can turn it into a positive experience, then they will have that forever. And what happens, and what I see in so many families, people that I work with, is that from when we're little, we are told that certain emotions are not okay to have. So as babies, we have the full range of emotions, but as we grow up, we get told So every family is different. Some families it's not okay to be angry. Some families it's not okay to be sad. We can't deal with it. When we can't be with our own anger and sadness, we certainly can't be with it in our children. And so we bring up these children where there's only half of them there. The other half has been so suppressed. I mean, I have to say, even myself, I don't know why, but I never got angry. I don't know where, I don't remember the actual thing, but anger was not an emotion. And one day I realized, I need to be angry here. This is a situation, these kids are actually, I need to be angry because I need to draw my boundaries. So every emotion is precious and it's not a mistake. And every choice and every circumstance and every person you meet and every marriage you get into and every divorce, it's all part of the process of you becoming your most magnificent self. And
it's absolutely fascinating when you think about the people that you're attracting in your life, and that there's a much bigger reason, there's a greater learning. Really fascinating. Let's take a break and we'll continue with this discussion after the break.
Hi, my name is S.V. Prinsloo and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Well, welcome back. This is Conversations with Niki, and I'm Niki Seberini, and I'm very, very happy to be with you. We're talking about divorce, but we're focusing on spiritual divorce, how to see the whole divorce process as an opportunity to grow as a person and to move forward into a wonderful life. I have Philippa Levitt in the studio, who is a spiritual divorce coach. I have Bev Loubser, who's a divorce attorney. Julie has been sharing her story. She got divorced 10 years ago, and it's been such a positive experience. Obviously not when she was going through it, but 10 years down the line, she's living a wonderful life with magnificent children that she is so incredibly proud of. And in a moment I'm going to be talking to Laura, because it's just looking at a slightly different angle, and Laura has just got divorced recently. Before we chat to Laura, let's just welcome our syndication partner listeners. It's Eldo's FM and Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, 90.3 MC in Plet, Neisner FM, Wild Coast FM and Bay FM. Welcome. So we do have Laura on the line, and Laura is going to be looking at something that we haven't really discussed with you, Julie. I mean, you mentioned very briefly that you were in a relationship quite soon after your divorce, and interestingly enough, you happened to choose a man who was very similar to the husband, or certain traits. But we've jumped forward 10 years. Now we're going to look at Laura, who's recently divorced and who is in a position when she's looking at moving on and how to move on. So Laura, hi, and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Niki, for having me. It's lovely to be on your show.
So Laura, you're recently divorced.
Correct. Recently divorced, separated for 2 years.
And how was the divorce process?
Niki, very traumatic. Even though we had 2 years to kind of work through a whole lot of things, I think once the finality of the divorce had gone through, it was hard. It was hard once the children knew for sure that mom and dad were divorced, and it was absolutely final, because along the way we were talking to our children about certain things, especially my older child, who was extremely perceptive and very emotional, and before I could even say anything, Jamie would just pick up on what was happening around us. So we had to be very truthful with him, and we're still going through a lot of emotional ups and downs with him. But my ex and I work very closely together. Obviously before the divorce and during the separation, it was very difficult. I had to move from home into my parents' home. There were major changes within the family dynamic. But the funny thing is that Dad and I are closer now than ever. In fact, we've become best friends, which is phenomenal, and we've chosen to go that route because we realized that during the time when we were going through our hardships and our challenges and the fighting, that it wasn't good for the children, and relationships, what they were seeing in our relationship would shape their future relationships. And I didn't want that, because I came from a family environment where my parents have been married for nearly 50 years. They have the most superb relationship, and that's what I saw. So I got married very young, also, as Julie said, expecting this fairy tale kind of marriage, and in the beginning it was. And then we all evolve and we all change, and then we start to realize that it's not working, and by forcing it and by continuing with it, it's going to just affect everybody. And it was doing that. It was breaking us all down, including my children, who are still young. I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. And when we finally, I'm moving backwards and forwards now, when we finally did tell the children that we were separating and going to live with my parents, they were, the crying and the sadness, and I think it was Philippa who said earlier that we need to sit down and cry, we need to feel all these emotions, and we're all still feeling emotions, because we are, every day things are changing, and that's why I think moving forward at this point now is very important, because we seem to have waxed and we seem to have mastered our relationship out of the marriage, which is healthy at the moment, and Dad's always around, and he's an incredible father. So when I hear women saying, my ex is doing this and he's revolting and he doesn't pay maintenance, I'm always horrified and actually saddened by that, because we're all human and we're all going through this.
Well, I'm sure, Laura, I'm sure people who are listening are wishing that they were in a situation where they had an ex that they got on so well with, that they were almost continuing with a partnership, for the children. How did it happen? You've said that you realized that it was causing damage, but was it a process? Did it happen over a period of time?
It did happen over a period of time. I think, as was said earlier, there is a connecting point. Something connects you together, whether it's spiritual, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's just whatever it is. Maybe there's a nurturing side that you're looking for in your partner that you need to that brought you together. It's something like that. And I think we both, after the separation, I think there was hope that there would be a coming together, even though we didn't go for counselling. There was a choice not to go for counselling, and there was, like I said, a hope of wanting to get together, but it just didn't happen, because for me, once that separation took place, that for me was my closure. That almost was my divorce, because after being married for 18 years and making that decision, which was so difficult, we then realized, and it was a process, because it was very, for the first 2 years, it was adjusting, it was doing all those things, but then in that time, it was almost as if we were both changing, and my ex was changing in a way where he almost became more spiritual. He was finding a little bit more peace in himself. I was possibly having, like I said, staying with my parents. I was getting the support that I needed and what the children needed at this time. And I think that in itself, and also my parents allowing the ex to come to the house and have dinners with us. And we still have it. We still have dinners twice a week. So my parents have been incredible and very human-like and humane in allowing that to happen, because a lot of parents don't. Because they hurt. There is a hurt that comes. The whole family is affected. Of course.
Let me bring Philippa in. Philippa, you've just heard, Laura's story. Recently divorced and a very good relationship with her ex. Do you have any comments? Any questions?
Laura, hi.
Hi, Philippa.
I find your story really inspiring, I have to say. I think it is wonderful what you have done. You seem to have the children's best interests at heart.
Thanks, Philippa.
You seem to be able to have found a way that you can be in one another's presence without fighting and making it into a terrible experience.
Absolutely.
You are actually showing the children something amazing. But so many people don't have that security of being able to go back into their parents' home for this sort of transitory period that you're in, and so that has made it so much, I would imagine, so much easier for you. And that, together with who you are, the way that you have decided to handle this. I find it extremely inspiring. I would say, however, that as I perhaps said earlier, is that there are no accidents, and we aren't attracted to someone for no reason at all. There's something there, and I would suggest that even though you are so resolved and you have come so far, that you still took the time to see how has this relationship in some way added to you? In what way? Why do you think that you actually called it into your space on an unconscious level? What have you gained from it? I mean, if I look at it from the outside, I'm seeing an amazing ability to resolve an issue and move forward, which so many of us are just completely unable to do. So you can look at the gifts of what this has brought to you, and at the same time look to see, okay, I called this into my space. What is it showing me? What is it mirroring to me about myself? And how can I use that in order to get to the next level of who I can be? The other thing is to really see your responsibility in the process. So the breakdown has been really well done, and it's just been with minimum damage. But the fact that it did break down, it would be really useful perhaps for you to look to see what role did you play. Did you step over issues in order to keep the peace? Perhaps you didn't draw boundaries. I'm just throwing this out because I don't know. Perhaps you're a people pleaser and you just wanted to please, and you weren't, and therefore you landed up in this situation. Perhaps in some way you denied your power and your strength in the relationship, and so you found yourself in the situation which became untenable. Perhaps you didn't honor or nurture yourself. So to actually have a look to see what it is that co-created it, so that you don't need to at any point in the future repeat it, and you probably won't. But at least know, okay, well, this is what happened, this is the role that I played. That's taking your power back. That's going from being the victim in a situation, which I'm not suggesting you are, but in a sense you do have a marriage that didn't work out. That is really, and the more you make peace with this situation and with him, the better it is for the children, because they're going to see that they've already had an unusual example of how fantastic it is.
And you know, Philippa, it can also be quite difficult, and I'm finding it happening at the moment, because my son keeps questioning, why are you and Daddy not together? You have such a wonderful relationship, Mommy. You talk to one another, and in fact my little 6-year-old insists that we always hug when he comes in and when we leave, because kids have, and this is where my heart breaks, Philippa, is that when I look at them, and there's always this glimmer of hope in their eyes, because kids have that. They are the beacons of light. And kids always wish that their parents would get together. And sometimes I think to myself, oh, why couldn't it have worked? Even though there's no desire to go back. But why? What, you know, and so I am still questioning that, because the kids are still subconsciously affected. And I had an issue with my son last week, where he said to me, why are you and Daddy divorced? You talk so nicely. There's this, you know, Mommy, Daddy always sees us, we do things, and when we're with them, we love being with Daddy. When we're with you, we love being with you. So they're always questioning that. And sometimes and in fact my ex said to me the other night, maybe they're seeing me too often. Maybe they're seeing that, why shouldn't we be together? Because everything seems fine. And I did explain to my son at the time that when two people can't live happily together, it's not fair. And I had people saying to me, but can't you wait till the kids are 18, Laura? Can't you wait till they're 20? And a lot of my friends had said that to me, because a lot of them are in marriages where it's so hard for them to get through it, and they would love to leave, but they can't for various reasons. And for me, it was not that, because when I reached, I think it was 30, we did have issues. I was married at 23. Within the 7 years of the marriage, there was a breakdown already. And
may I ask, if I just may interrupt, is that breakdown irretrievable? Are you quite clear that it's irretrievable?
It was so funny, Philippa, but we never, when we got back after that, because we left one another for a while, for 2 months. I came back home again, in fact. And when I got back into the marriage again, it's almost like we hadn't resolved anything. Because I think at 30 I had grown, and I was evolving, and I was changing, and I was studying, and I was doing all sorts of things. And maybe it was hard for my ex at the time. I still don't really know, because he comes from a family where they don't communicate much, and there has been divorce in the family, and so we come from very, very different backgrounds.
Yes, well, perhaps that's what you
so
need
it wasn't
to...
resolved then.
Yes.
And then when 10 years later, when we went through the same issues, and it was just exacerbated by other things, I realized that this can't happen again. I can't sit in this again. And then obviously we both made that decision.
Yes, okay, I hear that. So perhaps to have that discussion with the children, that people grow, people change, we still love each other, but people need to, we need to move on. This is not about you, making that very clear, and that there's going to be a point at which he's going to find someone else, and there's going to be a point at which I'm going to find someone else, and this is not, this is not about you, it's not a comment on you, it's really just about the fact that this is what happens. We've learned so much from each other. I wouldn't have changed the past for anything. I wouldn't have had you if I hadn't gone through this. I wouldn't change it for anything. But I too need to find love again. I too need to be in a partnership with someone that is that's working well, that's strong, that's powerful, and that will be for you guys too. It's just, and I think that is the way, and I think you need to start preparing them for that, insofar as you said you just can't go there again. And perhaps you can even say this mini breakdown along the way, I worry about how it impacts you guys, and I want the best for you. And so just, I think they need to get a sense of what this really means, because they're not getting a sense of what divorce is.
In fact, I'm not sure if we still have time, but we had that discussion the weekend, and my son, in fact, broke down from it when he, for some reason, he just said to his dad, "What happens when you do meet somebody, or when mommy, it was more me, when mommy meets somebody? I don't want to have a stepfather, Daddy. I don't want anything to change, because he's so against change. Let me rather say he finds change very difficult, so we're working through that with him. Great. So anything that happens, if there's a change that takes place, it's quite difficult for him, and he needs to adjust to it." And he thought about this quite seriously. What happens if mommy does meet somebody else steps into our life, and it's going to change everything, and I don't want that. And his dad very clearly explained, very, very patiently explained to him that it's just like if you want a puppy and you want to have a companion and you want to share something with somebody. That's what mommy and daddy sometimes need. We're not old people. We're still young. We still need to live. But sometimes very difficult, Philippa, to explain it to a 10-year-old when all they want at this stage is to have their parents together.
So, Laura, just one more thing that I want to say, and that is that we want to protect our children. We don't want them to suffer at all. Yes. But unfortunately, sometimes things happen in our lives that just takes that out of our hands. We all want perfect parents and perfect marriages, but it just doesn't work that way. And I think that I know that this is, I might be going too far here with you by saying this, but I think on some level, on a very, very deep level, they too sign up for this, and that on some level, they too can, through this process, have experiences that will add to them in ways that you can't see. So we want it all perfect with the picket fence and mommy and daddy happy ever for after, but it just doesn't work that way. So this is what it is. How now can we take this and go to the next level and live good and happy lives? And you've got such strong foundations there. You're so blessed. You've got the extended family, you've got all of that. Take that, but do start to prepare them for the fact that it is now normal and natural for both of you to begin to look at getting into new relationships, and that it's not going to take away from them, because ultimately they do come first. I can hear they come first.
And they know that, and they speak to them on a daily basis. They are our blessings, and they're not going to become victims of this.
Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you, Niki.
Thank you for sharing your story.
You're more than welcome.
And we hope that people have been inspired by your story, really.
So do I, because it's something that we all need to work on in a continuous
Very
basis.
much so. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you,
very
Niki.
much.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye. So, I mean, there you've got... Bev, I wonder how, because of all of the divorces that you've worked on, how often do you see two exes working so well together? So even though they're not married, they're still working together almost as if they're a married couple.
It can be done. From what I'm hearing a little bit there, I'm not sure that they've actually really dealt with their issues. So they've kind of parked them, because we're now in a place where we're getting on really well. We're just going to park all those issues. A bit concerned that that may fall off the shelf in a couple of years' time, but it can be done. But it takes a concerted effort from both parents to say, I'm not going to be that selfish person. I'm going to let all that hurt, I'm going to deal with all of that hurt, go through the process, go to see a psychiatrist or psychologist, or do a course like Philippa offers. It can be done. It's a choice not to do it. It's a choice to be a father that doesn't pay maintenance. It's a choice to be a mom that withholds contact. It's a choice to create an issue every time there's an issue that doesn't need to be created. It's an actual choice. So yeah, if you're going to be putting your children first, that's
always number one. Always number one.
Always.
Yesterday you were talking about something else that can complicate a divorce, and that is religion, when religion comes into it. And Julie, you McGuide, you converted.
That's right.
And did that bring a lot of complications into the divorce?
Niki, it might have on some level. It's not something that I would dwell on or think about at any length.
Okay.
Because we had been together for such a long time, I was under no pressure to McGuire. What happened for me was that when I first met him, his family lived in a lovely flat in Yeovil, very humble family, an Israeli family who had come to live in South Africa, and I really loved the Jewish traditions. I loved Friday night dinners. I wasn't always welcome from the start. The Israeli mom didn't love having this little shiksa in her house, but we grew to like each other, and we became quite close, and I really loved what the religion had to offer, bearing in mind that I was raised by very religious parents as an Anglican, but somehow religion didn't make sense to me. And when I questioned it with the elders in our church, I was asked, to shut up and just have faith, which really didn't help me. So what I really enjoyed when I did meet some Reform rabbis, and I questioned them blind, and they had answers for me, and they had lots of answers, and I loved that. So I actually made a choice to McGuire for myself, and the way I look at that is that it was a year-long history lesson for me. I had the most amazing rabbi who did the conversion process for me. He taught me to read Hebrew. Fortunately, I'd been exposed to it through the family, etc. I can't remember any of it now, but I loved getting up in shul and reading the prayers and whatnot. I enjoyed the community at the shul, but ultimately, as I've grown, I've discovered my own spirituality, and it's not in the form of any religion. So sorry to say, I'm not raising my children as Christians or as Jews. They are Jewish because I converted and because I am Jewish, but we see life in our own way. And so no, I believe that fundamental values caused a problem for us, different values, but not religion, no.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. Philippa, so talking about spiritual divorce, and I know that there are these 7 laws, and I must say that I find this whole shadow side and going and looking for someone in a relationship just to bring something out, I'm grappling with this one, do you know what I'm saying? To really dig deep and find those issues and face them, I suppose, and be honest. But what I think must possibly be a huge challenge when going through divorce is getting rid of anger and looking at that person and being able to forgive a person. I think that forgiveness must be one of the hardest things to actually carry through. Perhaps you've got some insights and ideas when it comes to forgiveness.
Absolutely. Niki, I think the thing that first of all, I don't think you can just forgive. And you can't just say, okay,
sure,
I forgive, it's fine. Okay, so first of all, when we look at forgiveness, we're not talking about condoning, okay? But what we are saying is this about forgiveness, is that when you do not forgive someone, the person that you are harming is you. Okay, it's like drinking poison every day and thinking the other person is going to die. So to walk around with this heavy load of non-forgiveness around you, so what is actually harming you. So what we really say is, can you just allow someone to have made a terrible mistake with you? Can you just allow someone to have come into this relationship with terrible baggage and they played it out with you? Can you allow someone to have had their fears? And can you just say, okay, I don't condone it, but I'm not going to let this hold me back anymore. And we really think that forgiveness is a really key aspect of going from the past to the future. Debbie Ford always used to say it's the hallway between the past and the future. You have to walk the forgiveness way. And we have a way of doing forgiveness that is so beautiful that I'll end up crying every time I do it with someone, because what we do is we imagine the person that we are in such anger and resentment towards, and we imagine them as a little child, and we have a conversation with the child in our head, and we ask that part of them, this little child, why did you do this to me? And we know deep, you talk about this inner knowing, we know why they did it. There's always something that happened in their lives that made them the way that they are. So in a sense, they too are just a victim and perpetrator. We are all just part of the same kind of cycle. So forgiveness of the other person is one aspect of it. And the other aspect is forgiveness of self, because we might not be aware of it, but on a very deep level we are beating ourselves up for having made this choice, for having gone into this relationship, for having certain qualities, for having, we ultimately, the person that most needs our forgiveness and that most needs our approval, when you really get down to it, is us. We are the ones who we need to forgive. And we are the ones who need to approve of ourselves. And that's why this is, so great, because we spend our lives looking into the eyes of other people for our validation and for our approval. But the truth of the matter is that we are only looking for one person's approval, and that's ours. And so you go through this process where you actually get to the point where you realize, oh my God, I can actually be quite gentle with myself. So I made mistakes, so he made mistakes. It's okay. We're human. That's why we're here. We're here to learn. So, and that's okay. And if you can just get to that point, then you are ready. And we even do a thing where you cut these kind of energetic cords of disagreement between you. And then you are ready, once that has happened, to create something new. You're now ready to go in and create a new relationship.
So, even if it's not an amicable divorce, even if you are still arguing over paying maintenance, you're still, the issues with the children, are you seeing enough of the children or aren't you? If there are issues because they're now involved with someone else and you don't like who they're involved with, and your children are now exposed. So even if you have all of these issues with spiritual divorce, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, you are rising above all of that. Rising above it to be a better person, a more full, whole, integrated person, so that you can move on instead of always being stuck in that place. Have I got it? Or am I far off?
No, not at all. You've got it, except you're not just rising above it. You are going through it consciously.
Okay.
You're going into it from a conscious position, from a big picture perspective, and only then, when you've seen the wisdom, when you've got the wisdom, when you've understood, when you've taken your power back, when you have truly forgiven, not on the level of your head, because that's not a true forgiveness, like, okay, I forgive, but on the level of your heart, where you've really understood, where I want to get people to the point, and often do, but not always, where they go up to their ex and they actually say, thank you. I mean, can you imagine?
No.
This person has
Wow.
ruined my life. But I can actually say thank you, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have found these qualities. Even you were speaking about it. Look at the gift. Look at the gift even of learning about Judaism, which is a magnificent, deep, rich heritage. You would never have gone near it if it wasn't for
I
him.
mean, Julie's just nodding and nodding and nodding in agreement. Julie, I mean, what Philippa is saying here, for you, this whole experience, you've come closer to yourself. You've come more into yourself.
I would never have thought so at the time. But reflecting, and make no mistake, it's not a great divorce. there is a lot of animosity between the two of us, which is unfortunate, and perhaps Philippa and I can chat afterwards. But yes, there have been so many lessons, and what I needed was to become a stronger person, and I've certainly become stronger, and I know I've got a lot of lessons still ahead of me, but it's quite exciting.
We've got a whole life ahead. We all do.
You know, I'm watching some of my clients going through the spiritual divorce course, which we're running at my office, and I am watching in absolute amazement at how these women are having these epiphanies, and how these women are finding things out about themselves that are going to set them out on a course for their future. And they're not going to make the same mistakes again, and they're finding out things about themselves. It's a brilliant opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, listen, we could have brought you so many stories that you've seen, that maybe you've experienced, that are really, really awful. But I do hope that the two stories that we brought you today during this show will inspire you, and will make that bright light even brighter at the end of what seems to be a very, very dark tunnel. And divorce can take you to that very bright light, as we've seen with Julie, and Laura's still going through that. So Philippa, for people who are listening and they want to know more about the spiritual divorce, is there a website that they can visit? Can they find out more?
Yes, they can go to www.philippalevitt.com, and you spell Philippa with one L and two P's, and Levitt.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Philippa, thank you. You've got me thinking about a lot, really. Bev, thank you so much from an attorney's perspective. And Julie, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with everybody. It has been an absolute delight. And a privilege to be with all three of you. So thank you. And thank you for tuning in. I hope that you've been inspired and enlightened, and maybe it's just been interesting stories that you've been listening to. Please be in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Do visit the website www.conversationswithniki.co.za. Until next time, take care of yourself. Goodbye.
Hi, my name is Esvia Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps, and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by Studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.